Hello, thermoforming enthusiasts and RC car body enthusiasts. This is one that if you followed the last episode of the new bodies released, we had an issue with this particular body where weren't completely successful in some of the test runs we did on it. So I am going to discuss kind of what the issue was and what was used to or what was done to solve that issue. This is kind of a basic thermoforming problem, actually, is that this body or this mold, buck form, really a buck is a version of a form, not really a mold, but this form has a serious undercut around the roof line, right where the windows meet. And because of that, it's hard for it to release off the body when it's formed, to release off the buck or the form. And this is something that I've run into with some other ones we have and with limited success. This time playing around with stuff, I got it down, no problem. We had 4 bad ones before. I was able to get that type of result. That's not the one, but it's that is the good version of the body. So let me show you kind of what happened. This was the first step. This is, it's inverted. It was stuck basically like that and wouldn't come off. So it turned inside out, it tore. Of course, there was some webbing that we took care of with some web catchers later. But then so that was the first one. Then we went to this one. This is the second one. You can see it's not quite as inverted. Then we come over, and this is the third one, and we're getting a little bit better. A little less inversion on there. And then there was the last one before a good one. You can see it's actually almost not inverted, at least to the other side of the sheet. And then finally we got a good one. And what that was starting to play with settings. And it was a combination of things. I believe, first of all, to get from this to this was basically adjusting the cooling time of the part on the form before it comes off. And that, got okay. That was pretty good. Then we adjusted that up, I think, a little bit higher, a little bit longer time. And then we also increased the air eject pressure. So that's the reverse air. Instead of sucking down on it, we told it to give it a little shot of air after the vacuum's engaged to kind of release the plastic from the buck. And then this one is when I started to do all those and then reduce the vacuum time a little bit. Generally, I run about 3 seconds on the vacuum. This, I think I cut it about into 2 seconds or maybe 1.5 seconds. And you can see, I'm like, oh yeah, now we're kind of getting somewhere. We're getting a little bit better. But what it ended up being the final change is to get this set to 0.06 or 7 seconds on the machine so that it would come off and not get stuck on there. And what that means is that it sucks the air down around the mold or the buck form. It's hard to not say mold. But most people understand mold, so I say that most of the time in my videos. This, it still hangs on to it with that little bit amount of time and it gets a little pop. But what it's doing by changing the amount of time is it means the plastic doesn't get sucked down quite as firmly around the form, and so therefore isn't clinging to the parts quite as hard. It isn't. Maybe you might be losing a little bit of detail, but you'd probably be hard pressed to really notice it. And then, of course, we let it cool for a while so that it will retain that shape because we didn't suck it down so hard onto the form. And then we pop it off. Now, if you're at home trying to do this with like a shop vac, it's going to be hard for you to get an exact shorter time if you're doing something like this. So you might have to play around quite a bit with it, and you probably don't have the reverse air pressure, of course, to do anything to help you out. And so that really comes down to is you need to design your form so you don't have very deep undercuts on it. because you'll run into issues. Let me give you a little shot to kind of show you the undercut in here. You can see that's fairly significant. Obviously enough to cause problems. And so you want to avoid that in your design as much as possible. And also, if this wasn't secured to the machine, it would have been even more difficult to get it off the form. And that brings up a whole other video that we'll cover at a later date. But yeah, if you're trying to do this at home, maybe try shorter vacuum time and then let it cool for a little bit so that plastic is not so pliable that it's going to deform as much. It'll remain a little more rigid, but not too long, because you still want to maintain a little flexibility in it. What will happen is if you let it sit too long, then you're going to have a real hard time getting that off the form, and you're going to have to probably do cutting into the plastic to get it off the form. And then you might end up ruining what you were trying to form on there to begin with. So it's probably not worth it. So that's something you can play around with if you're having issues with something you have. If you're, thermoforming at some place and trying to do RC bodies for somebody under some contract, keep this in mind. Some of these older ones, they were using most likely skin packaging machines, it's called, for vacuum forming. And those don't have quite the vacuum force that something like I have that has a purge tank where you suck all the air out, and then when you release a valve, it tries to equalize the pressure with the surrounding room, and so that gives you the big nice suction onto your form. Most of those were done with those skin packaging machines, which don't have a lot of things. They're more like a shop vac really in their power. So keep that in mind if you're using a big industrial machine and you're someone doing this with some older forms and everything, that you may have to kind of think down in capabilities. So anyway, if you have any questions or comments, as always, leave something down in the comments and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Have a great day and thanks for watching.
To it.